I try to do it in person if I can, but these days, sometimes you have to end up in Zoom. First, you want to make sure that the candidate is very comfortable and they can take breaks when they want to. And my experience is that the nature of the deep dive interview gets so exciting and intense that time flies.
Welcome to the Leadership and Legacy podcast, where we interview inspiring CEOs, entrepreneurs, and software leaders who are building remarkable companies and legacies in the world. I'm your host, Austin Yoder, founder of Magrathea Partners, an entrepreneurial investment firm dedicated to acquiring and growing one great founder-owned software company. As part of my journey, I'm learning from inspiring leaders and builders and gathering the most valuable insights and advice I learn along the way here with you, my wonderful audience, so that we can all learn and lead better together. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you'll find as much value and insight in the show as I do. Welcome back to the Leadership and Legacy podcast. We have the honor today of being joined by a longtime friend, mentor, and investor of mine, Mahesh Rajasekharan. And Mahesh has hired more than 1,000 people over the course of his career. We're extremely fortunate to be able to release this interview with Mahesh for his best tips, his advice, his insights into creating a great hiring practice. And we're going to release this on January 1st as a gift to the world coming into 2024. So hiring is one of the most important and impactful skills for any leader, any CEO to master. And Mahesh is undoubtedly one of the best hirers in the world. Mahesh is the president and CEO of Cleo, the pioneer and global leader of the ecosystem integration software category and provider of the Cleo Integration Cloud platform. The company provides its software services to more than 4,200 companies around the world, principally in supply chain-driven industries like manufacturing, logistics, distribution, and retail, among others. Mahesh, thank you so much for joining us and for your time today. Welcome.
Thank you, Austin. It's a real pleasure for me to join you on this podcast.
Fantastic. Our audience is primarily CEOs, software leaders, and students who aspire to be leaders and CEOs in the future. Just so that we all have some context on your background, which I'm familiar with, but so that our audience has some context. When you started at Cleo, what was the rough size and what is the rough size today, so that we get a sense of the journey kind of from inception to present?
Yeah, when I started at Cleo, April of 2012, we had 37 people and less than 10 million in sales. And today, Cleo is 450 people, a global organization with locations in Chicago, Rockford, Pennsylvania, Bangalore, India, England, London, and most recently in Amsterdam. And while I cannot give you a very specific revenue number, I can tell you we've been steadily growing CAGR well north of 20% over the past 11 years.
That's an amazing growth story and certainly requires some masterful leadership to guide a company on that path. So you started at around 37 people. You're around 450 people today. So roughly how many people are you hiring per year?
I would say globally we hire between 50 and 75 people per year.
Mm-hmm. And how many people roughly have you hired over the course of your career, Mahesh? Because you've been an executive for a long time, even prior to Cleo.
Well over 1,000 people across I2 Technologies, which is now Blue Yonder, Some Total Systems, an early Vista portfolio company, and now Cleo.
And how has your hiring process evolved over time? Like, certainly this is an area that every CEO learns, evolves in. From the early days, how has your hiring process evolved?
In the early days, it was a lot of people talking to the candidates. Sometimes you get carried away by people because of the resumes or because they work with a competitor. We, about 7-8 years ago, started to formalize and adopt the WHO methodology, which is an evidence-based approach to systematically looking at candidates in terms of fit, in terms of desired outcomes, and making sure you hire the best. It's something that we've really trained all the hiring managers and really trained the senior management. It is formalized in a book called Who, written by Jeff Smart and Randy Street. And there are a lot of consulting firms which actually train management teams how to deploy it and how to adopt it. We at Cleo, after some initial help from consultants, we have developed our own in-house training program on the Who methodology. And that's sort of one. The second important thing for us is we do programmatic hiring, right? We are not just looking for when a role becomes available or a budget gets approved, go and hire people. We're constantly looking to upgrade talent, continuously looking at talent that we know who are available, and have a sense of the kind of people we want to bring into the company. And the other thing we do especially well is we focus on the athlete profile, which to us is high aptitude and high attitude with a fearless mindset, very much aligned with our company's core values. In other words, we over index on key attributes such as intellectual horsepower, energy, enthusiasm, drive, customer focused mindset, very much a team first attitude. And we look at these attributes far more valuable than experience or track record.
So you're kind of basing off of this Who framework from the Who book, and you've developed some internal training. You're focusing on the athlete profile, kind of cultural fit, intellectual horsepower, energy, drive. What are the best practices that you've developed for hiring? This is a great framework for us. What are some of the best practices that you've developed?
First of all, it starts with a job scorecard, which is very different than a job description. A job description is, sort of looking at, how many years experience, whether you have a bachelor's degree in engineering, you have an MBA. But a job scorecard is very much around the desired outcomes, right? When you're sitting with this candidate after you hired them, hypothetically, 90 days out, how successful will they be in meeting the outcomes for the job? And it's a lot of work because most people don't exactly know what the role entails. And so having the discipline to write a detailed job scorecard in terms of accountabilities and outcomes is very critical. That's where it starts. In fact, in the whole book, they define that an A candidate has at least 90% chance of achieving a set of outcomes that only the top 10% of possible candidates could achieve. So our goal is always to land an A player by defining the desired outcomes right. So that's sort of step one, right? Once you have the job scorecard, the next step is to make sure you have a pipeline of great candidates because without a pipeline, you really cannot get through this 90-10 rule, right? But once you've done that, then now you got to be efficient because you cannot talk to everybody. So we have a very disciplined 45-minute screening interview, which either HR conducts or the hiring manager conducts. It's either or. The goal is to weed out 80 to 90% of the candidates. Then I think that the most defining thing for us is a deep dive interview. And this deep dive interview is done by the hiring manager, not too many people talking, one person. It's a 3 to 5 hour interview. And the key here is to make sure that the candidate is so energized in 3 to 5 hours, they're going to share everything with you. So you're really figuring out will this person be a fit? And the candidate is figuring out will we be a fit for them? It's really a two-way exercise. And you honor the candidates the way you ask the questions. You go chronological and you make sure you ask the same 5 questions across every job right out of college through where they were in the previous role. And this really allows you to understand the fit as well as how they work with the peers, how they work with the bosses, what kind of accomplishments they did, and it becomes very evidence based, right? And the evidence you collect in the deep dive interview allows us to go and do reference checks. So that's critical. Then you also do a focus interview for certain roles, like engineering, like sales, where you need to absolutely look at competencies beyond the attributes, where they can program well and they can debug issues, etc. And then you do a reference interview. The reference interview is not just a reference call, where you just make a phone call and someone who likes the candidate just says something's really nice for 20 minutes, then you hang up. Here you identify the right people to talk to based on the deep dive interview, right? People who they worked with, and then you have the permission from the candidate to be candid with the reference to open them up. So I found this really incredibly valuable in 2 ways. One, you're hearing very specific insights about the candidate, especially red flags and things they've done well. But also the second part of it is you also identify the perfect opportunity and the perfect environment where this candidate is going to thrive. And that's so important for us to make sure the candidate after we hire are set up for long-term success within Cleo. And the final step, when you're really looking at the best candidate, you need to absolutely sell the candidate on Cleo, right? To make sure they're highly energized, they're excited to come and become part of the company because great candidates have ton of choices, and we need to make our place the one place that they want to come and make it their home.
And that sounds like a very comprehensive and evidence-based approach to hiring. Just to circle back to the top part on the topic of a scorecard, I would just be curious for one brief example of how a scorecard is different than a job description.
Yeah. So the biggest difference between a job description and a scorecard is in a scorecard, you're laying out the outcomes you want them to generate. For example, for a CFO, right? The number one outcome is, can they be a great sounding board for the CEO and for the management team who has complete understanding of the business, complete understanding, in our case, the SaaS metrics, and who can be someone that others seek out and get counsel. Now, during reference checks and during what they shared with you in the deep dive interview, you would see if those competencies were demonstrated in the previous roles, right?
Mhm.
Another one would be for a CFO, do they have an orientation to legal, for example? Have they enjoyed working with an outside outsourced legal firm or with in-house counsel? Have the interest to get into contracts to make sure that we can structure good long-term contracts with price increases and other metrics. A third orientation is M&A orientation. Do they have a good M&A orientation? Have they built strong relationship with bankers? Right? Can they ensure that they can put together a very good post acquisition integration plan, working with the management team? Right? Another area could be, can they really bring in a financial sense into the way the product roadmaps are created? Can they ask questions around the potential for a new product? Can they ask questions about the right investment profile? And so this is an example of, do they have those capabilities and competencies? And what would an A player look like? This through evidence in the deep dive interview, and then go back and check in the reference during the reference calls.
Like that's a super helpful and illustrative example. You just brought up the topic of interviews again. How do you conduct an interview, Mahesh?
So the way I conduct interview, I make sure to let them know to block out 3 to 5 hours. I try to do it in person if I can, but these days sometimes you have to end up in Zoom. First, you want to make sure that the candidate is very comfortable and they can take breaks when they want to. And my experience is the nature of the deep dive interview gets so exciting and intense that time flies, right? So you want to create that environment first. Second, you also want to set the tone that you're looking for an evidence-based discussion, and always let people know that everyone, all of us, when we have all the big highs, we also have lows. We also have inevitable low points. It's important that it's a two-way dialogue where that's acknowledged. And so you sort of set the tone. I want to hear the good things. I also want to hear the things that did not go well, so that we can align on how we can, find areas where the fit works well. So more things go well than they don't go well. So that's setting the tone is important. Then I basically go through 5 questions from every job, starting right from the college degree and right out of college. What were they hired to do? Right? What is the job? What accomplishments are they most proud of? What are some of the low points during the job? And this is where you dig for details early on to make sure they become candid and tell you, hey, I really like the situation, but I didn't like interacting with sales. Or I had a challenge when my boss told me this. And you just identifying those, and then they become very comfortable as they go through the progression. Then you get into who are the people they work with specifically, especially who was the person they work for, the boss's name, make them spell it. You ask them, what was it like working for them? What will they tell me were your greatest strengths? So by this question, the implication is you're going to be talking to that person. So there is a sort of that threat of reference check, which makes people both comfortable and candid in telling you the greatest strength. And you do the same thing about what would they tell me are your biggest areas for improvement. Ask about the team. How would you rate the team you inherited on an ABC scale? What did you get? And then what changes did you make? Did you hire or fire anyone? And then how do you rate the team you left on an ABC scale? And then the most important question is, why did you leave the job? Right? So these are the questions I typically repeat from job to job. And there is a cadence. And the best candidates, after the first or the second job, they fall in the rhythm and they become more engaging, more open, and you just hit it off, and then it really becomes a great dialogue. And one other thing which is important is mainly listen and take notes, and do not acknowledge or add your opinions or thoughts during the interview process. Really make it an opportunity for the candidate to share with you the responses to these questions. And that's really important, which I think sometimes hiring managers make a mistake where they superimpose their views and they start, in the nature of two-way dialogue, they start leaning one way or the other versus carefully listening to the candidate.
That's really helpful and really interesting. And I can imagine how 3 to 5 hours could fly by with the right type of candidate and how it would be so energizing. So let's say that, there's a great candidate in front of you. You've gone through this deep dive process. Everybody is feeling good and energized. How do you then coordinate with your team to create a great hiring experience across the team?
Yeah. Very, very important to make sure that the candidate feels special. So we work exceptionally hard to make sure everybody is coordinated so that the candidate experience is first and foremost. We over communicate. We send them calendar invites. Make sure if they're traveling, to one of the Cleo offices, the travel is coordinated. The key thing is to remember that we want to create an environment where the best and brightest want to come to our company. So you want to make sure that experience is memorable every step of the way. And you can have one incorrect response, or someone didn't respond to an email on time, or didn't, or kept them hanging, and that's all it takes to ruin the experience. Because we are trying to land the best and the brightest, and we should always remember they have a ton of choices. When it comes to focus interviews, it's important to share all the background about the candidates in advance. So interviewers can do their homework, they review the resume, come in well with the questions, as opposed to scrambling for detail at the last minute. And also, we provide an easy method for people to provide consolidated feedback about the candidate through our HRMS system. So all the information is pulled in, so we can do the analytics and make the final decision.
So they're going through this very highly coordinated process. Travel is coordinated, calendar invites, communication is all coordinated. How then do you determine if someone is actually the right fit for the role that you're hiring for or not?
Yeah. So here you're now down to the top two or three extremely strong candidates. Now we become completely objective. First, to look at all of the results of the deep dive interview, the focus interview, and the reference checks to determine the perfect fit for the role. That's sort of lens one. The second lens after that is to really further differentiate candidates based on how they fit against our core values. And our core values are clear, are people, innovation, customer, and results. And we look at how, based on the track record and the deep dive interview notes, they score on these areas. Furthermore, we have a brand promise around art of appreciation, an egoless culture. So one of the bedrock expressions within Cleo, our corporate essence, is we approach everything from the standpoint of appreciation. So given that in a candidate, we're looking for someone who will bring appreciation for others into the role. Not just they want to be appreciated, which is also important. We will appreciate them. But can they bring appreciation of others, customers, their peers, other department members? And we also look for people who will complement and enrich our culture, as opposed to someone who can agitate and damage. So these are the sort of three lenses we go through. But the objective lens is the most important, which is evidence based.
Hi, it's Austin, your host, with a brief interruption. Since this podcast is free and not supported by ads, I have a very quick ask for you. If you're finding value in this conversation, please consider sharing it with another leader or aspiring leader who you think would enjoy it so that we can learn and lead better together. And if you're a software founder considering a successful exit to a partner who will love your team just as much as you do, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn or send me an email at austin@magrathiapartners.com. That's Austin at Magrathea, Magrathea, magrathiapartners.com. Thanks, and now back to the show. So there's a lot driven by cultural fit there. And once you're working between 2 to 3 amazing candidates, then it is, it's more possible to really hone in on cultural fit at that point. And so, Mahesh, you gave us an example of the scorecard for a CFO role. I would just be curious to hear a little bit more as you design a scorecard. You have a role that you're hiring for, and it's kind of you and your team sitting down to work out what are the deliverables, 30, 60, 90 days out. Are there any other tips for designing a scorecard for a job that you would share with us?
I basically start with who is a world-class executive, for example, right? You got a world-class CFO, world-class CRO, world-class CMO. You have some mental models of, people who have done extremely well. So that's definitely an input. And then you kind of look at where the company is. And given where we are in terms of our current scale and what needs to get done, if someone were in the job, what kind of outcomes would happen? Right? I gave the example of CFO. Let's take the example of a CRO. For example, for us right now, we are driving a lot of growth. So you need someone who can drive predictable execution, who can manage sales cycle time, who can recruit great salespeople, who can ensure there is a great coverage. So you kind of write down what is needed. For example, now we are branching more into channel sales. So you want a CRO who's got experience and who's lived building channel programs, right? So you first write down what you want them to absolutely accomplish in the role as if they're already in the seat. That's a tip. So don't look at general job descriptions or Google search. Take a piece of paper and write down if that person is going to be in the role and they're going to make us fire on all cylinders, what would be those outcomes they'll be doing? They'll be making numbers every quarter. They will have a 3 to 4x sales coverage. They will have every salesperson achieving quota, right? So you kind of walk that down and then you write down what capabilities are needed to achieve those outcomes, right? That's the first thing. Second is you look at the company fit, right? For example, in my C level, I always look at someone who can be someone that other executives can go to for consultation and advice outside of their department, right? So, would the product person go to the CRO and ask for inputs about the market, right? That's an important quality. It's not just that they can get their work done. Can they be a true team player? And do they have understanding of SaaS and cloud to be someone who can bring in unique perspectives into those roles, even though their stated role could be sales, but now you're providing feedback to product or feedback to marketing. You are considered an executive who's got the experience and the street cred to provide guidance, right? To be a source of knowledge and discussion. So I sort of take those three things and start writing them down without pushing myself in any structure.
That's super helpful. These are really tactical, actionable tips. So thank you for diving deep there with us. So you've been through this process. You've scorecarded people. You've done the deep dive. You've had people across the team interview them. You've sold them on Cleo. They're ready to sign up. What are the best practices then for supporting a new hire after they're hired to make sure that they're successful as they get on board and up to speed?
The most important thing is how you onboard them, right? Most important, after they sign, how do you coordinate their day one? When they come in, what is the experience they come in? Their laptops are ready, their emails are set up, they're welcome. That's important. The first impression is very important. We talk a lot about culture, but the other person is coming from a different culture. So if we don't spend time walking them through our core values and our culture, they're going to fill the vacuum with the culture that they're bringing from the previous company. Nothing wrong, right? While you want a lot of expertise and learnings from other businesses, you want them to embrace your culture. So the first thing is you got to teach them your culture. So we have an elaborate onboarding process where we spend time up company level strategy and overview, regardless of the role. We of course go through the HR benefit because that's very, very critical for people to get set up. And then we spend time on culture. After that, we get into training programs for the specific roles. And that's typically a blend of company level and job level classes. And we have assessments. So this way, we get them to an early immersion about the company, about our products, about our markets, about our strategy, and the specific roles. So they are very quickly set up to succeed in the first 30 to 60 days. So once you've done that, very critical for managers to have frequent one-on-ones. We actually do frequent one-on-ones with everybody. We try to do a combination of more frequent one-on-ones and informal check-ins. It's important for the manager to check in with the candidate because a lot of times a new hire is a lot is thrown at them, right? They're learning about the company, they're trying to get to know their peers. Unless the manager reaches in and finds out how they're doing, they're not going to open up and share. So that's really important to get them super productive very quickly. Provide rapid feedback, right? A lot of times they may not be getting help. They may not know to reach out to somebody in marketing or reach out to somebody in product. So bring those other company resources to bear so they can accelerate on their journey within the company. And then I would do a 90-day assessment, which is important for us to go and take this job scorecard, which I said was basically an outcome based, right? So it's a very hypothetical candidate who's going to be successful in the job. So 90 days is a great litmus test. So 90 days in, if you take the job scorecard and look at everything we talked about, are they close enough? Or did you make a mistake? So usually, if you've done a good enough job, it's going to be some areas where you're not communicated well, and then you can correct. But also, you will see some early warnings because not every hiring is perfect. Even with the best of evidence-based, the whole methodology hiring, you'll still get some errors, but you'll identify early on. And you're not going to wait, hey, the jury is still out. We don't know enough. Let's wait for 6 months. Let's wait for 1 year. You will know in 90 days whether you got a superstar, whether you got somebody who's strong, but some tweaks are needed, or you made a major mistake.
So you're really also using the assets and resources that you developed through the hiring process to continue to check in with the candidate along the way and help to continue to set them up for success.
Absolutely.
I love that. And I know that you hire so many people and you're so involved in leading, but as Cleo continues to scale, many other people have to manage a hiring process. How do you coach people, Mahesh, who are new to hiring, who are maybe hiring for the first, second, third time?
This is an extremely important topic for us. As we're growing fast, we have a lot of talented people who we grow through the organization and promote them into hiring managers, right? And we're also bringing people from outside who are used to different ways of hiring. Typically, people use hiring methodologies where 70 people talk to a candidate. Everybody talks, they get together, share ideas. So first off, it's about core values. So it's really important to make sure we review the core values through the lens of hiring. Even for internal promotions into managers, they're used to living the core values, but not use that frame in hiring new people. And definitely for people we bring in from outside, it becomes very important. So we spend a lot of time on core values and how to look for that. We make the whole book mandatory for them to read. Then we have an in-house built methodology that we train. That HR trains. I actually sit in on some of the sessions and do some of my own coaching around how you do deep dives and reference checks, for example. And then we give new managers immediate feedback when we see gaps in the methodology. Sometimes, because of the rush to hire people, when they know people from previous jobs, there tends to be a skipping of the methodology. And what's important is not just because the candidate is a bad candidate we hired, a lot of times they hire great candidates. It's also great evidence you collect as part of the deep interviews. It's an important data process as well as we constantly iterate. So we remind new managers not to skip any steps. So these are some of the ways by which we do refresher training, we do new manager training, and the goal is to have a very consistent evidence-based hiring methodology at all levels in the Cleo organization, which is then complemented with some specific things we do for sales, for SDRs, etc. That comes into the focus interview part.
Fantastic. Just awesome stuff. And so kind of shifting into our last section here, Mahesh, you have hired and attracted an awful lot of amazing talent to Cleo. What would be your best advice for other people who are striving to attract amazing talent to their own organizations?
First, it's really how you project a high performance culture, right? Where the best and the brightest want to come and build their careers. You want to make it super exciting for them that they can see a 3, 5, even 10-year vision of how they can accelerate and grow their careers within the company. That's really important. For the best people, they do not like bureaucratic layers. So the top talent want to have the freedom to move fast and accomplish great things. So showcasing how people will have freedom to get things done, that becomes important. One of the things we do within Cleo is we push decision rights a lot deeper into the organization. So people at all levels can take ownership of outcomes without red tape and unnecessary approvals that hold them back. Mentioned, we focus a lot on long-term career paths. We have examples of people we hired as BDRs who became account development reps, who became account managers, who became sales executives, who become director of sales, VPs. So we have done that in a pretty short period. And we also do that by giving them cross-departmental moves. So we don't hold people back. We allow people to internally interview for all positions, right? And the final thing, which is very, very important when we talk about culture and appreciation, what people miss is it's also important to focus on your top performers, right? Your goal is to make the best and brightest stay with you, which means you also want to get rid of underperformers. The underperformers cause irritation, right? It's very difficult for the best people to tolerate underperformers. So it's extremely important for us that we're either promoting from inside to get to those roles or bring top talent, but you need to make sure that you're getting rid of underperformers so that the best and the brightest continue to challenge themselves and grow.
Great advice. And then what about advice for CEOs and leaders who are actively working on improving their hiring process?
So first, I would go back to this idea of programmatic hiring, right? That you're constantly looking to hire. You may not have the money, but you're looking at people and profiles and roles you want to bring. I'm a huge advocate of hiring ahead of the growth curve. For smaller companies, it may look like additional expense impacting short-term EBITDA. But it's really, really important that if you embrace a talent mindset and if you hire strong people ahead of the growth curve is going to come. And I've seen ton of examples where those CEOs who brought in talent intentionally ahead of the business growth curve got to the growth much more successfully, much more easily, and exceeded those goals than those who waited until the last moment and then bring in the people to achieve the growth. So it's so critical because great people demystify things and they make the complex simple. And you can look at potential issues way ahead and resolve them. So that's sort of my number one advice. Number two is, remember it's a lot easier to make the right hire first than eliminate a troublesome employee later. So being a lot more intentional hiring is important, right? Hire slow. Do not settle. Do not make compromises. Sometimes you might have an open role in sales and you've got a sales number to achieve and you want to have somebody managing the leads. But oftentimes that bad salesperson will take up leads, lose the deals, and take up space, which you could give it to some other salesperson who can outachieve their quota and get paid more, and the company achieves their goals. So, really important to be intentional hiring, and far more important to take the additional time to hire a star, especially in key roles. There are some roles where time could be of essence, but in any critical decision making role or in sales roles, you cannot compromise.
Fantastic advice. As you know, Mahesh, the title of the podcast is the Leadership and Legacy Podcast. And we always like to ask about this question of legacy to anybody who spends some time with us. I'd be very curious to hear a little bit about what legacy looks like for you and for Cleo.
Our legacy is basically solving one of the largest unmet problems in all of supply chain management, which is integrating the B2B ecosystems, right? Connecting a company with its ecosystems of customers, suppliers, third party logistics providers, financial institutions, so that we can ensure a frictionless supply chain execution across all aspects of a company's supply chain. I've spent more than 2 decades in supply chain, and a lot of the work in supply chain happens around supply chain strategy, around supply chain planning, but people are missing the supply chain execution layer, which is why supply chains are hugely inefficient even today. And it's now further compounded because of the growth in e-commerce and omnichannel fulfillment. So now you've got traditional retail-driven supply chain is completely transformed because people are now buying omnichannel. You can look at as stuff in the store, then you go back and order online, or you may be browsing online and then you actually walk to the store and buy the product. And therefore, for us at Cleo, building this new category of software called ecosystem integration, that what fires us up. We're essentially reinventing traditional business to business integration in the era of the cloud with an API first, a digital first approach to enable supply chain convergence. And by that, we look at everything in the supply chain from logistics to warehousing to manufacturing and make sure everything gets converged because most issues happen in silos and we're driving end-to-end visibility and control for businesses of all sizes. We believe we'll create a legacy by making this category a game changer to create value in supply chains. And for me internally and for our leadership team, it's not about ego, right? The best legacy is the category becomes a really powerful force in supply chain digitalization. It's not about me or not about the team. It's about making the world a better place. So we want the company that we are building to carry on a no ego culture. So you're constantly getting better. You call a spade, accept mistakes, take accountability, and look to break ceilings and compound growth.
And Mahesh, what about for you personally? What does legacy mean to you? What type of legacy are you personally trying to leave in the world?
For me, it's two things I'm extremely passionate about. One is finding a way to create exciting technology jobs in cities outside of the traditional tech hubs of San Francisco Bay Area and Boston and New York. We have innovation centers of excellence in Chicago and Rockford in Illinois, Pottsville, which is in the greater Philadelphia region. And we're innovating more rapidly than all our competitors because we find great people in the Midwest from a strong computer science education who work incredibly hard and they have a customer focused mindset. So that is exciting for me. And if I can do more and more, looking at a lot of the smaller cities with great talent and hardworking people and transform them with a Silicon Valley mindset, that'll be exciting. And the second thing for me, which is somewhat related, is mentoring young leaders to reach their full potential in life and business. And I do that by spending a lot of time with them, and spend time in the evenings or weekends with them. A lot of times they have massive potential, but they would have some challenges because they've not seen certain fact patterns in life where I can share my perspectives. Besides over 25 years of scaling organization, in hiring people and in integrating organizations, growing sales, pivoting businesses, and if in any small way I can help these young leaders rapidly accelerate their career trajectories, that'll be awesome for me.
Very inspiring words. I know that the art of appreciation is such a core part of the Cleo culture. I feel enormously grateful to you for sharing your insights with us today, for your time. The audience may not know we're in the very thick of the holiday period. So you are, in fact, taking time out of the holidays away from your family to spend with us, mentoring and giving back. So just enormous gratitude to you. Thank you so much. This has been a fantastic masterclass in hiring that I know a lot of people will take a lot of value from, myself included. So Mahesh, thank you so much for your time. This really was a total pleasure.
Thank you, Austin. It's a real pleasure for me. It's always exciting to talk about what matters most, and hiring is important. Right? The biggest leaders have said they spend more than 50% of the time with the talent perspective, hiring, grooming, mentoring, and that's where there is true value creation.